Hey guys, Eric Sargent, General Manager at Ed Martin Toyota, and today we're going to start a discussion, is the 250 a real lane cruiser? Let's get started. So what we're going to talk about today is the 250 a real lane cruiser? I mean, lots of people are saying that it's not. It's a Prado. We know that it's a Prado. We know it's a light duty truck per Toyota's definition on it. But in the U.S., it's a lane cruiser. So is it a lane cruiser or is it not? And my definition is Toyota owns the trademark. If they say it's a lane cruiser, then it is a lane cruiser. I have a 250 and I've had a 280 and previous generations 4060 as well. So although I'm not an expert, I'm not a technician, I would like to engage in a discussion in the comment section of the points that we're going to talk about today. So for starters, we'll go ahead and talk about the power, the size of it, a couple other metrics, and then I'll open up the discussion to the differentials, which I think is probably more of a defining variable than even the power and the size and all that. So let's flip over to the screen and look at some numbers. Okay, so let's go ahead and start out with talking about some key performance indicators. Obviously, the number one benchmark on performance is going to be horsepower, so we can start with horsepower. On a 250, it's got 326 horsepower. It's significantly less than a 200 series, but if you wanted to compare, I think arguably nobody would say that an 80 series is not a real lane cruiser. So an 80 series on a 1FZ, on the post 80 series, prior to the 3FE, retirement, we're looking at 212 horsepower. So all in all, the 250 is 50% more than approximately 50% more than an 80 series. So if we're looking at just horsepower, then arguably the 250 is certainly a lane cruiser. If we're looking at torque, then we don't even have to have that conversation because a 250 has more torque than a 200 series and any other lane cruiser that's ever been around, probably even a 300 series in other markets. So kind of moving on to the overall physical dimensions. So we got height, width, and length. It's actually 2 inches taller than a 200 series. The numbers that I'm getting are just from a general internet search, so I don't want to pretend that like I'm actual Toyota here, but I looked at the spec sheets that I could find on reputable sources for these models. So we're looking at about the same height as a 200 series, maybe even a little bit taller. Overall width is exactly the same as a 200 series and wider, I should say, than a 180 series. And then overall length is 194 inches, so about, I think the 200 series is 194.9, so under 1 inch shorter in length than a 200 series. So all in all, it's about the same size. If you have a 200 series sitting in your garage now, the 250 is going to be very similar in overall dimensions. And then dimensions on the width are from without the mirrors expanded. So let's look at overall weight of the vehicle, curb weight. We're at 5360, lighter than a 200 series, of course, but significantly heavier than an 80 series and a 100 series. GVWR, 6725, again, lower than a 200 series. As the 200 series, you can see, has the green check marks in almost every category. However, again, if we're comparing GVWR against an 80 series, it's still more than an 80 series. Towing capacity, 6,000 pounds, which is less than a 200 series again, but still, again, more than an 80 series. So in overall benchmarks of specifications on any of these lane cruisers, I think that you can make an argument that the 250 series is definitely a real lane cruiser. Okay, so what we have here is the ring gears and pinions for the 250, 200, 100, and 80 series lane cruisers. The reason that we have these out, we've already talked about physical size, engine, horsepower, torque, payload, GVWR, and ultimately, those are all great metrics to talk about. Is the 250 a real lane cruiser? I think from my arguments, I think that you could make that argument based on any of the metrics that I just mentioned. One metric that is a little bit harder to measure than just Googling, what is the horsepower of a vehicle, is the actual size of the differential. Measuring the differential on the outside of the vehicle isn't really going to tell you the size of the ring and pinion, and ultimately that is what's carrying the load of the vehicle. The more contact surface that you have on the ring and pinion is ultimately going to give you more payload, more towing, and probably all in all just more reliability long term, as a 30-year vehicle, as Land Cruisers are supposed to be. So it's very hard to measure contact surface on a ring and pinion, because you have a certain amount of room that is called the contact pattern. The contact pattern is where the actual pinion is actually touching the actual tooth. But as you know, the very top and the bottom of the ring gear is not actually going to have contact. So we have to assume that the larger the tooth is, the more contact that we have in terms of length and height, then that's going to translate to more contact pattern on the pinion. So again, we're going to measure. We've already measured these and put them on the spreadsheet. Not bore you with watching me measure everything here, but I will point out a couple of things. One, we don't know the composite alloy on this. Although a 200 is significantly bigger than a 250 series, right here on this rear ring gear, you can see that it is considerably more beefy. We really don't know what this is actually made out of. This composite may be some kind of unobtainium metal that is, far stronger. We don't really know that. What we do know is that Toyota is going smaller because Toyota is chasing government regulations in terms of fuel efficiency, carbon neutrality, and so on and so forth. So in order to do that, Toyota has to go smaller, which is of course going to be lighter. This is smaller for sure. Is it lighter? We have the weights of all these ring gears on the screen in the chart below us, or behind me. So we're going to again, the measurements have already been done. Another thing that we should point out is on the 80 and 100 series Land Cruisers, the teeth in the ring gear are 41. On the 200 series and on the 250 series, it's 43. Although two teeth may not make a big difference, it's still 5% more contact surface as it goes through. Again, I'm not an expert on gears by any means, but you can imagine that that the more teeth, the more revolutions the more contact pattern that you're gonna have as it goes. So although it's 5% more teeth contact surface, also could that offset 5% less reduction in overall size? I don't know the answer to that question. It's more of just a thought-provoking question. So what we'll do, if you would like to engage in the conversation, behind me is a chart. This chart is going to have the metrics of all the measurements for the ring gears for these series of Land Cruisers. I would like to know what you think. Is the 250 a real Land Cruiser? And let me know in the comments below. All I ask is that if somebody makes a comment, treat it respectfully. It's their opinion, and I'd like to know what you think about it too. So again, thanks for watching the channel. If you guys like it, please hit thumbs up, subscribe for future Land Cruiser content.